those adventures. In this one, we're going bivouacking and hiking in Banff National Park, a little place called Hoodoo Hall in Devil's Gap. Our journey begins here at the Ghost Public Land Use Zone. We are on the eastern border of it right now, and we're on Transalta Road. That gains access down to Devil's Gap. So here we are. You take Highway 40 in, north from the Highway 1A to here, Transalta Road. And we are currently located right here. And this road will take me all the way down to the South Ghost River, where Devil's Gap is. You can see just how big this area actually is. That's a huge map. Nothing but free camping, trails, hunting, fishing, hiking, mountain climbing, you name it. Travel on this road is rough at the best of times. It's recommended that you have a four-wheel drive vehicle, but you can make it to a certain point with a car. Past a certain point, it is definite that you will need a four-wheel drive vehicle. So this, once again, is Transalta Road in the Ghost Public Land Use Zone. So we're technically not in the mountains yet. Right now you're looking at the eastern slope of the frontal range of the Rocky Mountains. And by frontal range, I mean the first line of mountains once you exit the foothills. One of the first signs of spring here in Alberta are these beautiful purple little flowers, and they are called crocus. This is Devil's Head Mountain, a very popular climb and hike to the top, as well as Blackrock Mountain, another very popular hike or climb in the area. At the very peak of there's an old lookout tower where people used to watch for fires. It's quite the adventure. So here we have the mountain Orient Point. Far behind it is Saddle Peak. Then you have Mount Costigan, and that tall spike there is called Red Tower, and the one beside it, Kielbasa Tower. Now if you look in the center of the screen, that gap right there between the two mountains, that's Devil's Gap, and that's where we're going today. Now here's a better view of Devil's Head Mountain. It's a very prominent peak. It can be seen from the city of Calgary, easily defined. Even though the sign has been vandalized, it's still a good landmark here. We've reached the point where it's not recommended to travel without four-wheel drive. So please take it to heart. Do not pass this point if you do not have four-wheel drive. We're out here in the mountains, in the wilderness. If you get stranded out here, it could be days before you see somebody else. So please, come prepared and have four-wheel drive. Aside from this steep hill that's very slick, you get down here in this dry riverbed full of river rock, small gravel, very easy to get stuck. This is one of the reasons why it's recommended that you do not pass that point without four-wheel drive. You can still hike down here, but if you don't have a four-wheel drive vehicle, don't even try it. This road is passable with the four-wheel drive vehicle year-round, but if you have a car, I would say it's recommended only to travel between mid-April to November. Travel ends. As you can see why, giant rock berms preventing people from driving down into this valley here, into Devil's Gap, which is bordering on Banff National Park. Once again, there's Orient Point, Saddle Peak, Mount Costigan, Phantom Crag, and Kielbasa Tower. So here's what we got for packs. I got a backpack with some accessories on it and some webbing. I'll be using that later in my hike. Backpack is carrying the tent and the sleeping bag. You can see there's still tons of snow out here. It is only April, so it is going to get cold at night. So I found a suitable place to camp, relatively dry, still some mud and snow around. The best part is Costigan Mountain. Alright guys, so now that I'm at camp, I can dump about 90% of the weight I've been carrying. So let's set up that tent. Now let's talk about this tent. It's a French Army military tent, suitable for 2 men and their gear. It's a little heavy to carry around, it weighs about 7 pounds, poles and all. Now let's set her up and give her a review. First step is to roll it out and open her up. After you got it rolled out, the next step is to go around and peg down the perimeter. Next step, assemble your poles. Then prop her up. You'll see a spot on the inside, a little flap, and that's where you stuff your pole before you stand it up. Now you go around the outside and peg down the secondary tiebacks. This tent took me about 5 minutes to erect. Not bad at all. Now this tent has doors on either end, so you can have airflow through there or access easy. For a comparison, you can see me, an average sized man, in here, and then room for at least 2 more guys packed in here tight, or just me and my gear. It also features these Velcro air flaps. Put them up or down depending on your needs. Also, this neat little tie back here to keep your door out of the way. Pretty decent tent. For sleep gear, I got this military sleeping pad and a nice army sleeping bag to keep me warm tonight. It should be below 0, we're in the mountains. Also this little stuff sack. At the end of the night I'll stuff my clothes in there and that'll create a pillow. Now that camp's set up, it's time to look for some firewood. Now for firewood, I brought along my Fiskars backpacking axe, Fiskars folding saw, and of course my Bowie knife. Let's go get some wood. Here we are wandering through the bush, looking for firewood. I've had to go surprisingly far away from camp to find some dead trees. It's a very popular area for campers, so all the good wood I imagine is taken within proximity. So we're standing in an aspen patch here, and these trees this time of year are really hard to tell if they're dead or alive. So here's a few things you want to look for. This tree in particular looks like it's dead to me. It's got cracks in the bark. You look all the way up the top. It's dead up there. You don't see any buds on it. Nothing trying to grow new leaves. So the one way I like to test, just to be sure, is to make a strike in the bark. It doesn't harm the tree at all. And then you just feel. Is it dry? This tree is dry, so we found a dead tree. Here's an example of a live tree. Just a little strike in the bark is enough. You want to look inside it. You can feel that it's wet, but one telltale sign is that it's green underneath the bark, other than it feeling wet as well. So now that camp's set up, I've taken out about 90% of the weight I was carrying. So I'm just going to use this webbing for the hike. And what I'm bringing on my hike, not too much. Spits for a snack, Bowie knife, emergency wipes, fuel for my stove, the folding stove, utensils, soup and some fish, camera equipment, and of course an air horn and bear spray. This is bear country, so you need to be prepared. They will kill you. The weather here is cold, and it could get wet at some point in time today. So I chose to wear my Gore-Tex suit, pants and jacket. This thing is good. It's nice and warm, and it also protects against snow and rain. The best thing about this jacket is if I don't want to wear it, it folds itself into a tiny little pouch and I can carry it on my side. Let's get started on this hike. Here we are at the Banff National Park border. Now I've chosen to camp about 100 yards that way. That way I don't have to pay a registration fee, a wilderness fee, and a fire fee, which will cost you approximately $40 per night if you want to stay in the park. So I'm here on the border of Ghost Public Land Use Zone, where random camping is permitted, as well as fires, and I can also have my firearm with me. Past this point, no firearms allowed. It is a huge fine, and you don't want to get that. This is bear country. It's very possible that you can run into a bear out here, so you want to make sure you're prepared. You can't have a firearm on you, so you carry bear spray, carry an air horn, carry bells, put bells on your dog. Make a lot of noise when you're walking around. Also, be smart about it. Don't leave garbage out in your campground. Don't leave food out. Keep them in an airtight container so they can't smell it. I would recommend taking a bear safety course before entering this area. We are at the Banff National Park border. To get here from where I parked, you follow this clearly defined road, which is very visible from where I parked, and it's used for equestrian people who like to ride their horse through the park. So you follow that to the border where you can camp for free on one side and you have to pay on that side. Free right here, not free right there. Let's get started. Today we will be hiking through Devil's Gap to a place called Hoodoo Hall. It's a hidden canyon past the first ghost lake on the left hand side. There's also a frozen waterfall there and some ancient hoodoos. Now to get there, you want to follow this horse trail that you've been following up to the point of the Banff Park boundary. Our hike's going to take us behind Orient Point. So this is the northwest face. We got to go all the way around that mountain, Saddle Peak, around the back, and that will take you to the backside of Orient Point. You just follow this trail here to the first ghost lake, and we'll go from there. Here's another look at Costigan's Mountain. It's a very famous climbing area, as well as Phantom Crag, Mabasa Tower. Here's an example of an aspen bud. All trees that grow leaves will bud in the spring. That way you know this tree's alive, and you don't even have to do a bark test to it. It's not just bears you have to worry about in this area, it's also cougars. So I make a habit every now and then to check behind me. Most often or not, they'll come from behind. Here's my jacket folded up into itself. Nice little carry case. The pathway opens up into this dry riverbed, and it carries on westward. That way you know you're close to the first ghost lake and getting close to being behind Saddle Peak. Now we've reached an important part in the hike, where this river behind me opens up into this dry ghost lake. Now this ghost lake gets its name because it disappears. Depending on the time of the year, it could be full of water and this river would be running, or it could be dry like this. So now it's a turning point. You want to follow that way, along the edge of the lake, in behind those trees, down from Saddle Peak, take a left there. That is the entrance to Hoodoo Hall. You want to make sure you know where you're going here, because it can get easily confused. You might end up in there, which is Planters Valley. Because you're at the Ghost Lake, you might want to take a left into that canyon. So be sure you see Saddle Peak. Follow it down, right there. That's where it is, left into there. A short time after the Ghost Lake, you'll come to a point where you have to bushwhack a little bit through some thick brush in order to get behind that. Or you could take a really long way around the lake and around in a dry stream. I'm just taking a shortcut. After about 5 minutes of walking through the thick brush along the ridge, the bottom of Saddle Point, you'll pick up on another trail. That's the one you want to follow. The snow here is still really deep, so travel is slow. Lucky enough, I get to follow someone else's footprints. Eventually you'll end up in this dry creek bed. I'm sure there are many ways to get here, but we took the way I mapped out, using satellite maps and topography maps to find the entrance to Hoodoo Hall. Here's some good landmarks though. You're behind Saddle Point now, and it's the opening to a canyon. I'm very familiar with this area, yet I've never been here before, so let's go together. So I'm facing north right now, looking at the entrance to Hoodoo Hall. Hoodoo Hall is behind me. I'm looking back down, where you come in. If you see this heart shape in the mountain, you know you're in the right place. And also, the tattletale, you're behind Saddle Peak. Right in front of you right now, a little hard to see, is the first set of hoodoos. I'll get you closer. So here's the hoodoos, formed from hundreds of years of erosion. This one's very distinct, hard to make out. It's actually a tower with a rock on top of it. Because of the backdrop, this camera does it no justice. I've managed to climb up behind it for a better view. You can see how it's actually a tower with a little boulder on top. It's hard to see because of the backdrop, but this is a very distinct looking hoodoo. Here you can see it. It's a tower, standalone, with a boulder on top. This is called the hoodoo. There are many of them in Alberta. None like this though. The other ones are made out of sand, and they are in the Drumheller in the Alberta Badlands region. And I managed to scramble up this greasy little gravel pile here to get you a nice look at that hoodoo. Now here's a very distinct hoodoo. Another one, clearly defined, a tower with a boulder on top of it. It may look pretty small from here. It's actually about 20 feet high. Here's another look at that hoodoo. Right here. 20-foot tower with a boulder on the top. It's hard to make out. You're gonna have to come see it yourself. Here's another hoodoo. Kind of a chubby one, but he's a hoodoo. These are beautifully crafted layers of limestone. They change direction all over the place. Pretty cool. Now your hike could end here at the hoodoos if you wish, or you can carry on through the canyon to a frozen waterfall called the Green Angel. Let's go. It's a beautiful place, this canyon. I don't think I'll make it to the waterfall today because I don't have snowshoes and the snow's about waist deep. That's just too much to walk through right now. We'll do that in another video. Nothing but tons of snow here. It's not quite spring in this canyon, it's still winter. So we made it to the hoodoos. Now it's time for lunch. Deep, deep footprints in the deep, deep snow. We didn't get to see Green Angel, but there is this frozen waterfall. We will be having lunch here today in the Hoodoos. Make us up a nice pot of soup and some canned fish with my little backpacker stove. Time to leave this beautiful place, start hiking back to camp. And remember, we take everything out that we brought in. No leaving garbage behind. It's unacceptable. Here we are again at the opening of the canyon. The heart and the mountain. We're going to take a different way back. That way there's views of both. Someone's gone and made an arrow out of rocks here, which points its way back to the trail. That's very helpful. When you're coming out of the canyon, you want to stay to the right along the tree line. You'll see this arrow. That's where you go. This is the other way to the canyon, but I just came from there and it's longer than the way we took. So I wouldn't recommend travel this way. We're at the west end of the Ghost Lake in the Devil's Gap. Here's Devil's Gap, a great view of it. It gets its name from the neighboring Devil's Head Mountain. Now there might be something you notice that's in common with all of these mountains around here, other than the fact that they're limestone. They all have sheer vertical walls. They were carved out thousands of years ago by a glacier, which at that time was the mighty Bow River. Now the Bow River lies to the south of us, but you can see evidence of the glacier millions of years ago. A good example of evidence of a glacier are these two erratic rocks here. They were carried by a glacier off the mountain and left behind when it thawed. They seem out of place, and that's why. Here we are at the national park boundary. Behind me is the Ghost Public Land Use Zone, where you are allowed to carry a firearm. I just want to remind you, if you think you're wise carrying a firearm past this point, there are hefty fines. Section 20-5 of the National Parks Act clearly states no one shall possess a firearm in a national park. If you are caught with a firearm, it's a $2,000 fine. If you are caught with a loaded firearm, it is an additional $2,000 fine. You don't want to do that. I've chose this location for my campfire tonight because it's a pile of sand and it's moist. So it'll work for my Siberian Log Fire, as opposed to lighting it over here where it's nothing but dry grass. That's just a recipe for disaster. So this here is the start of a Siberian Log Fire. You get your big backing log here, and then you make a bed out of smaller logs here in front of it. That way it's off the ground. And then you add some brush on top of there, and then some bigger logs, and then you add some logs going across horizontal. I'll show you all the steps when we light this. Devil's Gap is rich with history. It was first discovered by the First Nations people as a route from Morley to Canmore. Also, the Kootenai came through here to hunt buffalo on the plains. The Blackfoot and the Kootenai used to have fierce battles here, and there are many graves along the Ghost River, especially a place called Dead Man's Hill. Now, it's legendary that there are two ghosts that haunt this valley. One was a Blackfoot warrior who drowned in the river. Another is one seen riding backwards on a horse, collecting the skulls of the dead. That'd be pretty cool to see one of those. Also, it was discovered by the first white men in the late 1700s, developing the fur trade for the Hudson's Bay Company. Later on, the RCMP made an outpost here, and they even had a cabin here until the late 70s, when unfortunately, someone recklessly burnt it down. Devil's Gap is a great place to go hiking, camping, fishing, whatever you're into. I recommend it. Now, because we are in bear and cougar country, I'm taking everything that has a scent, like cheese. I got some coffee creamers there, instant coffee, oats for breakfast, wipes, and especially this stuff, dried fruit. Anything with a scent is going in this stuff sack here, and I'm going to tie it around a tree. That way the bears won't come, and if they do, they'll be at least 100 feet from camp. You want to go pretty far away. The first thing you want to do is get yourself a rock. Tie your rope around it. I'm going to use a clove hitch. So I'm going around the rock, crossing over, making an X on the back, around again. You want to put your dead end through the X. Like so. Through that X. Pull it tight. There's your clove hitch. Now I'll just tie a safety knot so it doesn't come undone. Simple overhand will do. Now you want to take your rock and throw it over a tree branch. Now let's see if we can get this. Perfect. Now you can see I've got it up high in the tree, which is what you want. Next, you come back down, tie your sack on the end. Now I'm on the other end where the rock is. We're going to take that rock out now. You're going to tie your stuff sack up. Again, I'll use the clove hitch. Make sure she's good and tight. You don't want it falling out of the tree. Tie one safety knot. Just an overhand knot again, that's fine. Next step, obviously, hoist it up in the tree and tie her back. Now all you want to do at the bottom with your rope is just tie a clove hitch around the tree and that'll secure it. That way the bear won't be able to get it. They'll leave your food alone. She's hanging up in the tree, safe and sound. Now that my food is safely up in the tree, I'm going to show you, just for an idea, how far away from my camp I really am. So let's walk back. There's my tent there where I'm sleeping. So it's well enough away from me. You want to make sure you do the same thing. I'm loving this backpacking thing. There's my tent at the base of beautiful Phantom Crag. I haven't seen a soul all day. Life is great out here. So a round trip hike from the truck to where we went and back is about 14 kilometers. Now we've hiked 11 of them today. I'm going to take a rest at camp and hike the last 3 tomorrow morning. Can't leave this place yet. Look how beautiful it is.
Yo, what up, world? This is Deshaun. Welcome to my world. You ready to take a journey?
This style of fire is called the Siberian Log Fire. You have your backing log here, which is usually a large log, and you want it to be green so it burns slowly, because it does act as the wall against the fire. Then you have some smaller logs here as a bed, which keeps it off the ground, so even if the ground is wet, you can still have a fire. Next you have your pile of grass and your pile of tinder ready to start it up. And the recipe over here, tinder, some smaller logs for the fire later, and then some big logs that go across the top. Now let's try and start this guy. Everything happens so quick. That's why you gotta have everything ready. Now that your tinder's on fire, add more tinder to the fire. You want to get a nice bed of tinder there, the width of the fire. It's important to have everything ready to go. Now I'll show you what those bigger logs are for. Simply place them over the fire like this. Now she's going pretty well. Here's a look from the side. You got your backing log, your fire lid underneath, and then your fuel logs back here. Those will burn a long time. The bigger the logs, the better. But this is a small scale version of it. So it's 6:17 p.m. Saturday, April 29th. It's been about 10 minutes since the fire's been burning. We'll just keep an eye on the time, just for an idea how long this fire will last you. These fires are great for cooking on. One reason why is you've made yourself a bed of logs underneath there. Once the tinder burns down and you get some nice coals here, you can put a pot there, pan, whatever. Both sides look the same. It's good for cooking. Since we're talking about cooking, let's talk about dinner. I've got myself a bag of rice, some canned salmon, and some canned asparagus. Now the reason I went with canned fish is because you don't want to be carrying a piece of raw fish around in bear country. That's a very bad attractant, and that will definitely bring them around. That looks like a good cooking fire to me, so let's get dinner on the go. First I prep my rice by taking it, folding it all down to the bottom. Work it all down as far as it'll go, and then roll it nice and tight. Now you want to take it, put it upside down, and whatever you're cooking with. Me, I'm using the GI cup, canteen cup. Fits in there real good. Next I'm going to pour water in there and sit it in the coals. Now the reason I roll it up like that is I don't want the flames burning the bag and melting plastic into my delicious rice. Next, I'm going to put it down in the coals here. Right up close to that fire. Let it sit there till she boils. Boil it for a couple minutes till it's hot, and it's ready. Now that the rice has been cooking for a bit, I'm going to add the asparagus and the salmon. Now I've just gone around and opened the top with a knife, and I've left the top on and I've left water in it. That way it'll heat up nice, and then you can just peel the lid back and eat her. like so. Cooking on the fire the old way. Now we've reached a point in the fire where some of the top logs have snapped off into the fire, fallen down. So all you want to do is take that log now, file her in again, hang it over the fire and let her burn. But I'm going to wait till my cooking's done so she don't get too hot. So here's dinner. We got garlic and butter rice, pink salmon, and asparagus. I prefer to take everything in a can, that way it's scent free and you can dispose of it easily after. I know it's a little heavy, so dehydrate is the best way, but nothing beats a good bag of rice. Now I, for one, am all about recycling and having a green earth and packing your garbage out and all that good stuff. But sometimes you're faced with a situation like this. Dinner's done and you got cans left over and utensils, maybe, you know, some cooking things. This one in particular is what I'm worried about. Pink salmon, grizzly bear's favorite treat. So there comes a time where I need to bend my morals a bit. What do you do with this stuff? Throw it in the fire. But don't leave it behind. I will pack these out in the morning. Not like some people who like to leave them here forever. The reason I burn my cans is strictly to remove the scent from them. Once they burn a little, I'll take them out and I will pack them out. Now, something like that, you can't just burn and dispose of. So, what we're going to do is pack it full of snow, melt it, give it a little scrub. Same as the utensils. I hold them over the fire for a couple seconds, burn whatever's on them off, and then wipe them out in the snow. One thing I forgot to mention about the Siberian Log Fire is the fact that you don't really need an axe or a saw. I came equipped with those, but technically you don't even need that. All you need is small logs you could break over a rock easily, some larger logs that you can find and drag around, and you need one big backing log. You don't have to cut them or nothing. Twigs you can break off of trees easily for kindling, so technically you don't need any tools for it. All you need to do is light it. Something else we need to talk about. Eventually it's going to be bedtime. And after a day like today, hiking around in the wet snow, jumping through creeks, all that, your clothes are going to have a lot of humidity in them. It's not a good idea to sleep in the clothes you wore all day. You need to change your clothes. It's going to drop below 0 tonight. So I got my nice sleeping bag, but on top of that to sleep in, I've got this fleece suit. And also another t-shirt, and the obvious change of socks, change of underwear. You don't want to go to bed in the stuff you wore because the sweat and the water and all that bad stuff will freeze and make you cold. Another thing is, a sleeping bag will only keep you as warm as you already are. So if you're cold and you jump inside a cold sleeping bag, you're not going to warm up. So it's important that you change your clothes. Change your socks, change your underwear, change everything. Now I'm going to tell you something else important. Half, if not more than half, of surviving is being prepared. If you're not prepared when you come out here, you're going to have a terrible time. I meticulously planned this trip, thought of every item I need, planned my path, planned everything. You can't come out here all willy-nilly on a whim and just go hiking in the mountains. You need to be prepared. You need to think of bears, you need to think of what you're going to eat, you need to think of how you're going to warm yourself, you need to think of what you're going to do in an emergency situation. There are lots of things to think of. Don't come out here thinking it's a party. This is hard stuff. It's easy sometimes too, but you just have to be prepared. It's very important. Preparedness is very important. Let's just take a moment to listen to how peaceful, quiet, and serene it actually is out here. I haven't seen a soul all day. This cut line in the distance, up and down the mountain, that's the actual Banff Park border. They make sure you know when you're crossing it. There are 2 signs around me right now that it's spring in Alberta. Obviously, the melting snow, the crocus flower, and listen. That's a robin. And they're everywhere here. And they're just going nuts right now. Truly is spring. It's definitely not the worst thing to find here. But why is this here? Does that look natural? Why did you leave it behind? It is now 8:17 p.m. It's been 2 hours. And the fire's still going good. Keep in mind this is a small scale fire. Traditionally, the size of that backing log there would be the size of your fuel logs. And your backing log would probably be about the size of this stump here. That's a traditional one. But I used what I had at my disposal. And it's going good. It's very hard to make out by this point because the sun has melted it today. What we have here are the tracks from a spruce grouse. Maybe a ruffed grouse, but the spruce are more prominent in this area. Look real close. I know it's hard to make out, but I know it's a grouse. It is now 9:19 p.m. It's been 3 hours, and here's the fire. I've had to add a couple more fuel logs and a couple more logs underneath, but it's still going strong. It is at this point where you would have to replace the fuel logs or turn it into a traditional style campfire with what you have remain. That would be your choice, but either way, you still have a good fire going. So we have our smoldering fire here. Got our dry grass, our tinder, nice pile of kindling. Let's start this fire again. Success! All we had to do is blow on some ashes. I'll let that catch. I'll add my kindling, and then it's breakfast time. No time at all. We got ourselves a fire roaring, melting some snow. We'll be cooking breakfast. Now breakfast is done, and we're left with a problem. We've got this fire here. What are we going to do to put it out? Well, I don't have any water, but I have all this snow around me, so what I'm going to do is pile a bunch of snow in there until I'm confident that it's put out. Now you might ask, what if I didn't have any water or any snow? Well, then I wouldn't have had a fire. I have myself a fuel cell and a camping stove to cook with, and that's part of being prepared. Thinking of scenarios and thinking of solutions. Now you can see the fire is clearly put out. I've put snow on there, stirred it, put more snow, stirred it around, and then left a pile on top. There's no way that's catching fire again. The logs from last night in today's cooking fire, they're stuffed in the snowbank. They're done too. And, as promised, I've removed my cans, and I'll be taking those home with me. Now it's time to tear down camp. Say goodbye to Costigan and Phantom Craig. Till another time. This is how things should look when you leave here. Everything packed up that you brought with you. Nothing left behind. That's the right way, guys. There's a sight for sore eyes. Almost there. Now that we're back safely at the truck, let's review some things. It's a 14-kilometer hike round trip, most of it being in Banff National Park. So if you plan to stay the night, stay just outside the border where it's free and you need no permits. You also can't bring your gun past the border, so remember that. Remember, you need to be prepared for anything you may encounter. You need to think of some emergency situations and some solutions to those. I'd also recommend wearing some quality footwear with at least an 8-inch heel. I have a 10-inch heel on my boots myself. It worked just fine. Reason being, you'll be walking over a lot of loose gravel and some big boulders, and at times of the year, ice and snow. You don't want to roll your ankle and be trapped back there. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. All in all, it was a good time. Glad to have you along, and thanks for watching, guys.